You pray, you ask, you cry out, yet even so, you continue carrying the weight in your own hands. Have you noticed how it's possible to talk to God and at the same time keep trying to control everything? Have you ever felt that no matter how much you pray, the anxiety doesn't decrease, the pressure doesn't lift, and the responsibility keeps crushing you? Maybe the problem isn't your prayer, but the posture behind it. In this video, you'll understand what it truly means to humble yourself before God and why surrender is not emotion. It is a transfer of authority. We're going to uncover a spiritual principle many people overlook. While you try to hold on to control, you prevent God from governing the situation. You'll discover the difference between asking for help and yielding authority, between seeking a solution and seeking His face, between speaking to God and actually stepping off the throne. If you're tired of living overwhelmed, if you pray yet still feel constant tension, this video can reorganize the way you position yourself spiritually. By the end, you'll have practical clarity on how to truly transfer control and understand why this is the posture God honors. Before we move forward, an important note. This video was developed with the assistance of artificial intelligence tools, organizing biblical principles and spiritual patterns to offer practical and applicable clarity. The goal here is not to replace spiritual discernment, but to help you see more precisely what may have been going unnoticed. You may be living in this exact conflict right now. You pray sincerely, ask for direction, declare trust, yet internally you continue carrying the weight of the decision. There is a quiet difference between consulting God and truly trusting Him, and often that difference remains invisible until anxiety begins to reveal that something is out of alignment. The issue is not a lack of prayer, it is the presence of self-government. You speak to God, but you continue leaning on your own logic. You ask for help, yet you keep the final word. This internal division creates constant tension because two governments cannot occupy the same throne. Proverbs 3:5 states clearly, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." Notice the order. Trusting with all your heart means not dividing authority, and not leaning on your own understanding means abandoning control as your primary decision-making foundation. Leaning on your own understanding is not just about making wrong decisions. It is structuring your security around your ability to predict, calculate, and control outcomes. When that happens, your peace depends on how well you can manage the situation, and that will never be enough. Many Christians confuse planning with trust. Planning is healthy, but when planning becomes your source of security, your heart is no longer resting in God. It is resting in your own ability, and any flaw in the plan immediately feels like a threat. Constant anxiety is a symptom of divided authority. If you truly surrendered government, why do you still feel the need to monitor everything all the time? Why do you mentally review every possible scenario as if everything depends entirely on you? Trusting with all your heart requires a structural decision. It is not emotion. It is not intense prayer. It is not repeating faith-filled words. It is consciously choosing not to rely on your own understanding as the final foundation. That means acknowledging that your vision is limited, that your interpretation may be incomplete, that God sees what you cannot see. When you accept that limitation, something begins to shift. The pressure decreases because you are no longer the center of government. But here is the delicate point. It is possible to declare trust while still holding internal reservations. To say, "I surrendered," while emotionally trying to adjust outcomes. This is the most common form of spiritual self-government. And as long as you remain in that place, you live in constant tension. Because deep down, you know you are trying to carry something you were never designed to sustain alone. The weight is not the situation. The weight is the responsibility you insist on holding. Perhaps today you need to ask yourself honestly, am I truly trusting, or am I merely consulting God while continuing to decide alone? That question opens the door to something deeper, because the issue may not be partial trust, but a surrender that looks spiritual without being real. False surrender is rarely loud. It is subtle. You declare, "Lord, I give this to you," yet you keep mentally organizing every alternative. You speak words of dependence but maintain emotional control over every possible outcome. It looks spiritual on the outside, but internally the command center has not been shut down. Jesus asked a direct question in Luke 6:46. "Why do you call me, Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?" This question is not accusation, it is diagnosis. Calling someone Lord means recognizing authority, but authority acknowledged verbally is not the same as authority practiced in real life. It is possible to treat God as a counselor but not as king, to ask for advice but not accept direction, to seek comfort but not relinquish control. This posture creates a functional spirituality. It looks right, it sounds right, but it does not change the axis of government. False surrender often hides behind emotion. Intense moments of prayer, sincere tears, strong declarations, yet no structural change in decisions. The feeling passes, and the pattern of control remains intact. The inner throne stays occupied. You can recognize this when God's answer does not match your expectation. If irritation, resistance, or the need to adjust divine direction to your convenience arises, that reveals something important. Surrender is still conditioned by your plan. Control disguised as spirituality is one of the hardest patterns to identify, because you keep praying, you keep seeking, you keep speaking about faith, but deep down, you maintain the final word. And as long as the final word is yours, the government has not been transferred. True surrender does not negotiate terms. It does not say, Lord, govern, but within these limits. It releases the right to define how, when, and through whom things must happen. That unsettles our sense of security, because we prefer to guarantee some level of predictability. Many want God as a strategic partner, not as absolute sovereign. They want Him to strengthen their decisions, not replace them. They want confirmation, not redirection. And that difference changes everything. When Jesus asks, "Why do you call me Lord?" He is exposing a possible inconsistency between declaration and practice. That inconsistency generates internal tension, because you affirm trust, yet live in a constant state of alert. False surrender preserves the appearance of faith, but keeps fear as the structural foundation. And fear always tries to control, always tries to anticipate, always tries to guarantee outcomes. Where fear dominates, the throne is still occupied. Recognizing this is not a reason for guilt. It is an opportunity for clarity. Perhaps you never realized you were living a spirituality of consultation rather than transferred government. That awareness is the first step toward something more solid. But if surrender is not emotion and not merely verbal declaration, then what does it truly mean to humble yourself before God? Because real change begins when we understand that humility is not a feeling, it is a position. Perhaps you have always associated humility with a specific emotional state, a feeling of fragility, sadness, or even self-deprecation. But biblical humility is not about feeling small. It is about recognizing who is greater. And until that distinction becomes clear, you may confuse emotional intensity with true spiritual positioning. James 4:6 states clearly, "God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble." This verse reveals an objective spiritual dynamic. It is not that God rejects people. It is that He does not cooperate with those who insist on remaining at the center of government. Grace flows where there is space. And space only exists when someone consciously chooses to step off the throne. To humble yourself, then, is not to change your mood. It is to change your structural position. It is to stop being the final authority over your own decisions. It is to recognize that your vision is limited, your interpretation may be incomplete, and your logic is not sufficient to sustain everything. It is to transfer the final word, even when that confronts your preference. The most dangerous form of pride is not obvious arrogance. It is quiet self-sufficiency. It is continuing to plan everything as if God were there merely to validate your steps. It is asking for guidance while already having internally decided the direction you want to take. It is consulting without submitting. When you try to control everything, even with good intentions, you are still operating from the center. And as long as you occupy that center, God does not compete for space. He does not force government. He honors the choice you make, even the choice to remain in control, even if it leads to constant exhaustion. True humility creates structural openness. It is not an isolated moment of prayer. It is a continuous decision to submit thought, direction, and priority. It is saying, "I no longer govern this," and sustaining that decision even when anxiety tries to reclaim control and convince you to take back the command. This is where many people hesitate. Because stepping off the throne feels risky. It feels like losing security. It feels like giving up guarantees. But in reality, it is an exchange of weight. You stop carrying what you were never designed to sustain, and that exchange transforms your internal stability. The grace mentioned in James is not merely forgiveness, it is active empowerment. It is divine support that begins to operate when government changes hands. God does not strengthen pride, He strengthens alignment. He sustains those who recognize higher authority and choose to remain in that position. Perhaps you are tired because you have been resisting without realizing it. Resisting the idea of not having total control. Resisting the vulnerability of trust. Resisting the posture shift that requires surrendering the final word. That silent resistance creates constant internal friction. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking correctly about authority. It is understanding that God governs better than you do, and acting according to that truth. It is accepting that the center is not your permanent place. When this shift happens, something begins to reorganize internally. Your relationship with decisions changes. Your reaction to pressure changes. Your need to anticipate every possible scenario begins to decrease, because the primary responsibility is no longer resting on your shoulders. If you realize that you are still occupying the center, that is not a reason for guilt. It is an invitation to realignment. To humble yourself is simply to acknowledge higher government and adjust your position accordingly. And that posture creates the environment where grace can operate freely. This shift in position is fundamental, because when you step out of the center, your pursuit must also be adjusted. It is not enough to change posture if motivation remains misaligned. And that leads to a decisive question. Are you seeking God's face, or merely seeking results? If this content is helping you recognize invisible patterns and gain spiritual clarity, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Here you will find practical principles, sound discernment, and consistent direction to strengthen your walk. There is a profound difference between seeking God's presence and simply seeking a solution to a problem. And if you are honest, you may realize that many of your prayers are born from urgency for results, rather than a desire for alignment. You want the situation to change. You want the pressure to decrease. You want the answer to arrive. But you do not always want your direction to be adjusted. Jeremiah 29:13 declares, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." This verse is not about emotional intensity. It is about totality. To seek with all your heart means not dividing priorities. It means not using God merely as an emergency resource, but as relational center. Seeking a solution is different from seeking His face. When you seek a solution, your focus is on the problem. When you seek His face, your focus is on His presence, and His presence may redirect you before resolving the circumstance. That requires spiritual maturity, because God's first response is not always to change the situation. Sometimes it is to adjust you. Many want intervention without transformation. They want God to change the external without touching the internal. But seeking with all your heart implies willingness to be repositioned. It means accepting that the greatest misalignment may not be in the situation itself, but in how you are handling it. Priority reveals government. What occupies your primary attention reveals who sits at the center. If your pursuit of God is conditioned on immediate relief, there is an invisible risk. You may be using spirituality as a tool for control rather than a path of surrender. Seeking His face means accepting direction even when it does not confirm your initial expectation. It means allowing God to redefine the pace, the strategy, and even the objectives. That may confront your agenda, but it creates structural stability. A divided heart maintains partial control. Part of you trusts, part of you monitors, part of you surrenders, part of you adjusts. And that division prevents real depth, because your pursuit is still conditioned by the need to preserve some margin of personal security. When you seek God's face above the solution, your posture changes. The problem is no longer the center of your energy. Anxiety loses fuel, because your stability begins to depend on His presence, not on the outcome. Seeking with all your heart also involves consistency. Not only when pressure increases, not only when decisions are difficult, it is a continuous relational pattern, and that pattern builds discernment, builds maturity, and builds real trust. Perhaps you are asking God to resolve something that He is using to realign you. And while you insist on the solution, you may be ignoring the invitation to depth. The right pursuit does not manipulate answers, it strengthens relationship. This shift redefines the way you pray. You do not pray merely for something to happen. You pray to understand what God wants to form in you while something is happening. And that completely changes the dynamics of anxiety. And when your pursuit is realigned, the next step becomes inevitable. Because seeking His face demands practical change. It is not only internal desire, it requires structural conversion. And that is exactly what we need to address next. Many people hear the word conversion and think only of the initial moment of faith, as if it were a past and completed event. But in practice, conversion is a continuous movement of realignment. It is a course correction every time you realize you have taken control again. And perhaps what is missing in your life is not more spiritual intensity, but structural reorganization. Romans 12:2 declares, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Notice that the text does not speak merely about external behavior or religious appearance. It speaks about the mind. It speaks about internal structure. Because you can declare surrender with your lips, but if you keep thinking the same way, you will keep reacting the same way. Conversion means abandoning an old pattern of government. It means recognizing that your automatic way of deciding, based on fear, urgency, the need for predictability, or self-protection, can no longer remain at the center. It is replacing the logic of control with the logic of intentional trust. You can pray every day and still maintain the same anxious mindset. You can ask for direction and continue analyzing everything based solely on your own calculations. That is not a lack of verbal faith. It is the persistence of an old mental system still trying to hold the throne. Renewing the mind means reviewing your decision-making criteria. It means asking honestly, am I acting out of trust or out of fear of losing control? Am I obeying direction or simply trying to reduce discomfort? These questions expose who is truly governing. Conversion as realignment also involves practical adjustments. If you say you have surrendered an area to God but continue mentally reviewing every detail multiple times a day, something has not yet been reorganized. If you claim to trust yet keep monitoring signs as if everything depends on you, the government is still partially in your hands. Transferring control requires visible decisions. Sometimes it means slowing down when your tendency is to act impulsively. Sometimes it means waiting when your anxiety wants to rush ahead. Sometimes it means acting courageously when fear tries to paralyze you. But it always means responding to divine direction rather than internal pressure. Renewing the mind changes how you interpret circumstances. Before, any uncertainty felt like a threat. Now it can be part of a process. Before, any delay felt like abandonment. Now it may be preparation. This shift in interpretation does not just change your thinking, it changes your emotional stability. Conversion is not religious guilt or added spiritual weight. It is intelligent repositioning. It is recognizing that maintaining the old pattern is costing you your peace, your clarity, and your trust. And consciously choosing to adopt a new pattern where God is not merely heard, but obeyed. Perhaps you are waiting for God to change the external scenario, while He is waiting for you to change the internal structure. Because without renewal of the mind, any external intervention will be temporary. The old pattern will quickly reclaim control. When the mind is renewed, responsibility begins to shift hands. You stop feeling like the sole person responsible for sustaining outcomes. The pressure begins to decrease, not necessarily because the situation has already changed, but because authority has been reorganized. This is the point where conversion stops being a concept and becomes daily practice. It is choosing to think differently, decide differently, and react differently. It is recognizing the old tendency when it appears and consciously refusing to let it retake the throne. And when this internal reorganization happens consistently, something tangible becomes evident. It is not just spiritual theory. It is practical evidence that you have truly stepped out of the center. And it is precisely this evidence that reveals what changes when government is transferred. There comes a moment when you realize something has truly shifted inside you, not because circumstances have already been resolved, nor because every answer has appeared immediately, but because pressure no longer dominates in the same way. When you step off the inner throne, the first sign is not an external miracle. It is internal stability. Psalm 37:5 declares, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will act." Committing your way is not merely handing over a specific problem. It is placing direction, decisions, and outcomes under divine authority. It is recognizing that you are not the one who sustains the future. It is accepting that government and results belong to God. When surrender is real, anxiety begins to lose strength. It may attempt to return in moments of uncertainty, but it no longer finds the same structural foundation to sustain itself, because the foundation has changed. Before, your peace depended on your ability to control. Now your peace depends on your alignment with the one who governs. Stability begins to replace constant tension. You no longer feel the need to mentally review every possible scenario over and over again. You do not have to anticipate every risk as if everything were exclusively your responsibility. A sense of order emerges, not from predictability, but from trust. God acts where there is space. While you fill every decision with fear and attempts at control, there is no margin for full intervention. But when government changes hands, something reorganizes. The primary responsibility shifts from you to where it always belonged. This does not mean passivity or neglect. Surrendering does not mean abandoning human responsibility. It means acting diligently without carrying the weight of what is beyond your reach. It means fulfilling your role faithfully, knowing that the final outcome does not depend solely on your strength. Another practical sign is the change in how you respond to pressure. Before, any sign of uncertainty triggered maximum alert. Now, even in the unknown, there is calm. Not because you know exactly how everything will end, but because you know who is guiding the process. The peace that comes from this alignment is not superficial or emotionally fragile. It does not depend on the absence of conflict. It is structural. It flows from the reorganization of authority. It comes from no longer trying to sustain what you were never meant to carry alone. When you step off the throne, your posture and decision-making changes as well. You do not act impulsively to relieve anxiety. You seek direction calmly. And when clarity comes, you obey without trying to adjust the instruction to make it more comfortable or predictable. Trust stops being a speech and becomes daily practice. You stop obsessively monitoring every detail. You stop imagining catastrophic scenarios as a way to emotionally prepare yourself. And you begin to walk consistently, even without having all the answers. Responsibility shifts hands. You remain committed, attentive, and faithful in what you must do. But you no longer carry the burden of sustaining what belongs to divine government. That distinction reduces emotional weight, reduces tension, and increases discernment. Perhaps you have lived so long, trying to control everything that you barely remember what alignment feels like. But when surrender is genuine, something stabilizes internally, and that stability is a clear sign that the throne has been reorganized. Yet this change does not happen randomly. There is a spiritual order that sustains this transformation. There is structure in how God responds to human posture. And understanding that complete order reveals why the right posture always precedes any visible intervention. There is a spiritual order that we often ignore, even though it is clearly revealed in Scripture. We want God to hear quickly, to forgive immediately, to intervene visibly, and to resolve whatever is pressing against us. But we rarely pay attention to the structure that precedes those responses. And when we ignore that order, we begin to interpret the absence of results as the absence of divine action. In 2 Chronicles 7:14 it is written, "If my people who are called by my name humble themselves, and pray and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, and forgive their sin, and heal their land." Notice that this is not an isolated statement. It is a sequence. There is progression. The response is a direct consequence of the posture adopted. First, humble yourself. Before any specific request, before any miracle, before any visible restoration, there is repositioning. To humble yourself is to step out of the center of government. It is to recognize higher authority in practical terms. Without this, prayer can become merely an attempt to negotiate with God while still maintaining internal control. Then, pray. But now prayer is born from a different place. It is not prayer meant to convince God to approve your plans. It is prayer that flows from an aligned heart. When government has already been transferred, the conversation changes in nature. You are no longer praying to manage anxiety, but to confirm direction. Next, seek His face. This expands the relational dimension. It is not just speaking words, it is desiring His presence. It is prioritizing who God is above what He can do for you. It is pursuing relationship before results. That priority reshapes expectations. Then comes turning, real change, practical adjustment, a genuine shift in direction. It is not enough to recognize that you were trying to control. You must alter behavior, decisions, and mental patterns. Without conversion, the old structure continues to operate, even if your spiritual language sounds correct. Only after this sequence does the text say, "Then I will hear, then I will forgive, then I will heal." Intervention is not the starting point. It is the consequence of respected order. God honors spiritual coherence. He responds to a structure that has been reorganized. This completely changes how you interpret delays. Perhaps heaven is not silent. Perhaps the order has not yet been completed. Perhaps there is a repositioning that must take place before the answer becomes visible. This is not a magical formula or spiritual manipulation. It is not a method to force God to act. It is alignment with what He has already established. It is understanding that divine response is not produced by emotional pressure, but by adjusted posture. When you respect this order, your trust matures. You stop demanding immediate answers and begin valuing proper structure. That brings stability, because your faith stops depending on speed and starts depending on alignment. Healing begins with posture. Before the land is healed, the heart is reorganized. Before external intervention, internal government is transferred. When humility is real, when prayer is aligned, when pursuit is prioritized, and when conversion is practical, something is established spiritually. Perhaps what is missing today is not more intensity in prayer, but respect for order, not louder cries, but correct sequence. Because God honors those who step off the throne and walk within the structure He revealed. If this content is bringing clarity and reorganizing your spiritual understanding, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Here you will find applicable principles, solid discernment, and practical direction to live in real alignment. Now the question becomes inevitable and personal. After understanding this order, where are you still trying to reverse the sequence? Where are you expecting a response without repositioning? That answer defines your posture before God. Now the question is no longer theoretical, it is deeply personal. After everything that has been revealed, after each principle laid out with clarity, something must be decided within you. Because understanding without repositioning does not produce transformation. Clarity without action preserves the same pattern of government. You have already realized that the issue was not a lack of prayer. It was not an absence of declared faith. The central issue has always been authority. Who occupies the throne of your decisions when pressure increases? Who defines the final word when the scenario feels unstable? Who is carrying the weight that should be in God's hands? Perhaps there is a specific area you are still trying to control in silence. A decision you mentally revisit every day. A situation you say you have surrendered, yet continue monitoring as if everything depends entirely on your vigilance. That area reveals your true posture. Ask yourself honestly, has my prayer been true dependence or merely strategic consultation? Am I seeking God's face or trying to validate choices I have already made internally? Am I willing to obey even if the direction is not comfortable or predictable? The posture God honors is not moral perfection. It is real transfer of government. It is not temporary emotional intensity. It is structural repositioning sustained over time. It is not refined spiritual language. It is the practical decision to step out of the center. Perhaps in this moment you need to identify clearly which area you are still holding under self-government. Not in a dramatic way, not as a fleeting emotional impulse, but as a mature and conscious decision. Recognizing where control is still being retained is the beginning of spiritual reorganization. In silence, choose to surrender that area, not as a symbolic phrase repeated by habit, but as a deliberate decision of authority. Decide not to carry alone what belongs to God. Decide to trust even if the external scenario has not yet shown immediate signs of change. This inner act is not fragile or emotionally unstable. It is structural. And when authority changes hands, something begins to stabilize within you. Perhaps the external situation will still take time to align, but your posture will already be correct. This is how transformation happens before manifestation. Order before response. Posture before intervention. God honors those who step off the inner throne and respect the structure He revealed, not out of obligation, but out of alignment. If this content has brought clarity, confronted invisible patterns, and helped you see your posture more accurately, subscribe to the channel. Here we continue to deepen principles that strengthen your faith, mature your discernment, and reorganize your spiritual structure. Now the decision stands before you. What will your posture be from this day forward?